I would say just from a very young age. I would say I started rebelling about third grade, where I was raised in a private Christian school. Was very Baptist, very much focused on what you could not do and discipline. That was my idea of God. Like, so I had I had this vision of God as like an old guy with a beard up in heaven with a chalkboard keeping score of my rights and wrongs and wanting to discipline me. So in having that in my mind at a young age, I was like, well, if that's how he is, then I'm just going to rebel and do what I want to do here while I can. And so I began to just, really question authority with teachers, even my family. And from that, obviously, anger was probably my number one issue, I would say. I was very angry. And in that, I believe like drugs and alcohol and all that stuff was just a product of a deeper root issue in my life, which I think the number one thing was anger with me. And from that, 19 years of addiction, where started using at 12.
What?
And from 12 to and I went from school to school because of just my attitude, and with threatening of teachers and getting in fights, skipping school, whatever the case may be. I was a problem child. And so to answer your question more directly, my life was total chaos until I found Christ. And I believed so many different lies that what defined success and what defined you as a person. I believe for the longest time how many zeros were behind your paycheck would define as who you were, and it defined success and however you want to say it or put your spin on it. And so with that, the Lord actually, I believe with all of my heart, allowed me to have the things that I believed would fulfill me. So I went through many different seasons, and it was like every time, like I thought, if I could just have this one thing in my life, I will be satisfied. And He would allow me to attain it, just to make me realize that like none of it was anything without Him, and not even knowing it at the time, right? And so everything that I thought that would satisfy and fulfill me, I was allowed to have, whether it was finances, whether it was cars that I drove, whether it was women that I dated, whether it was, no matter what it was, it all came to pass. And every time that I attained these things, literally the hole got bigger, inside of me. And I was searching for God and didn't know that I was. And so it wasn't, there's many instances I could speak of that, that brought me to a place where I thought that I was at rock bottom and digging many times. And there was still 1 ounce, I guess, or 1% of me that wanted to hold on to something from my past or from my old life, and not even knowing it. Wasn't complete surrender involved. So I would get free, if you will, for a season inside of stuff, and then sure enough, I'd slip back into it, and it'd be 10 times worse every time. So until I came to my end, when I was 33. When I was 33 years old, I hadn't fully surrendered. And when I did, it didn't look like an altar call. It didn't look like, what a lot of, the church says that a conversion would look like. I wasn't crying out for God. I wasn't. I was running from Him, like at this time. And it was very interesting how my eyes were open to eternity. How I actually, He allowed me to see things, that were things eternal. The battle in the spirit realm between dark. The best way to describe my salvation is the Lord allowed me to see a tug of war battle between darkness and light over my soul, and I got scared sober. And from that, He removed His hand from my existence. He allowed me to experience hell without actually going there, and there's no way to describe it. I've never been scared of anything in my life, ever. I just have this mechanism that just does not fear things. I was never afraid of dying, never afraid of anything. But when He did this and allowed, like, I always tell people, like, when I hear the word or hear somebody say hell on earth, it's just hell on earth, like, you have no idea what you're talking about. And it's not like in a negative slant. I don't think that towards people, but it is, no matter how horrible things are on this earth, the sun still comes up every day. We still breathe air. God's presence is among us no matter what is going on. And hell, what makes heaven heaven? God's presence. What makes hell hell? Absence of God presence. It's not the streets of gold. It's not, those things are just part of what it is. But like, we don't know what it is to live without the presence of God. We don't know. Whether or not we're Christians or not, we still have the blessing of the Lord on us. We do. We wake up, we breathe air, all these things. And we think that like a situation on this earth, we like to compare it with our mindset of like what hell really is, and it's far from true, far from the truth. So
it's crazy. So you were like on some major drugs, huh?
Yes, every one of them, you name it. The most, I would say, the most alcohol. I was an alcoholic. I remember the first time that I drank. I was 12, and it wasn't like, I loved it. I loved the taste of it. I loved the effect of it. I was hooked immediately at 12 years old. I remember thinking like, this is great. The taste, everything. It wasn't like I had to force it down and all that stuff. It was, I really just had a knack for it. And then smoking marijuana at the same time in that same year. Got into that, and then heavier drugs. Obviously, people like to call these things gateway drugs, if you will, and what opens up other areas. You're opening yourself up to wanting more and needing more, and other drugs are what open you up to that stuff. So, yeah, I went from that to, I was into cocaine for 14 years, ecstasy for where I was for years, but pretty solid with it for about 3. Every hallucinogenic, a lot of mushrooms, a lot of acid, every kind of pill, prescription-wise, whether it be Oxycontin or methadone. And then meth was the one that I really, in the end, is what brought me to a place of complete desperation. And that's when I found God. That was the end for me. It was meth. Mm-hmm.
When you had that encounter, were you instantly delivered from those things?
Yes. Instantaneously. It was and I didn't even realize it, bro. That's what's crazy, is like it was supernatural, and I didn't even know. Like, I'd been up for the better part of 9 months straight, literally without hardly any sleep. Between 9 and 15-day binges, and then sleep for 24 hours and then just do it all over again. It wasn't like, it was supernatural, leaving the activity that how I could operate at this time. And it was surreal to think back on, and how the Lord, it was always there, and I didn't know it, but looking back, it's so crazy. He actually took me back through it. I remember the better part of that whole last chapter of the old Ryan, if you will, almost like as if it was yesterday.
Wow.
And the Lord, I believe, preserved that in my mind to keep it fresh in me, and also to understand how to combat it with the Holy Ghost, and how real this is, how real this spiritual warfare is, and that it is that our battle is not against flesh and blood. It's really not, and it made it so real to me that I got to actually live out my actions and my choices, and I saw way more darkness than I ever seen light. And I understood that the supernatural realm was very real, just with demonic activity in my life, and being fully given over to it, and seeing the power inside of it, which is a far less, it's a counterfeit power. We know this, but at the time it was like, it was just, I was just given to it, man. And so it's amazing how he preserved, my memory and my mind and my physical, everything. It's amazing. He does make all things new.
Wow.
And it's pretty amazing. He's very faithful, as we know.
So what would you say to someone who's who's smoking weed, and they say, well, it's not a big deal, and it's not meth,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and they say they're a Christian. What would you say to them?
Well, in love, first of all, I tell them they're wrong, and I know this. I've had to confront this on personal levels, and I've done it in corporate levels, where the Lord has showed me different things as far as it's wrong, and that it is mind altering, and it's something. It's very much plastic and counterfeit, in comparison to true presence of God. Like, it is everything that we know that everything that the devil does is just it's so plastic, you know, whether it be whatever it is, however he operates, and drugs, like we talked about it just recently, this within the last couple of days, where it was like, you look at it like, we say gateway drugs, and it's like, okay, you can exhaust drugs, you can be like, okay, that was good for a while, but now I need more. It's the same thing when you translate it over to the Lord. Like, being in the presence of God, it's like this, there's this hunger inside that you're just never satisfied. You know, you're always content in it, but never satisfied, where it's just like, I need more and more and more. It was the same thing on the other side, but the effect of it obviously was death. You know, in the end, it's death. And sin was fun for a season. And that's, I mean, nobody gets addicted to something because it's no fun, because it sucks. You know, this is no good. This is, you know, nobody ever goes into it thinking, I'm going to become an addict and this is going to be the end of me. You know what I'm saying? This is just, it is because it is fun. It's glamorous. It's like you feel good. It satisfies the flesh for a season. And ultimately, what we feel in our feeling of it is killing us at the same time. And so, yeah, he's just a counterfeit. He's a fraud.
Yeah.
You know.
So let's say there's somebody out there watching this right now that's in the shoes that you were in love with meth, and just living life the way that you were. What would you say to that person, or what would you have wanted someone to say to you in that state?
Man, you know, honestly, bro, I don't know how to answer that, because of the state that I was in. I believed with all of my heart that I deserved a special spot in hell. I mean, I believed it.
Wow.
Because I was raised in a Christian home. Like, I always, so a lot of the times when I minister in jails and stuff, I see these guys and hear their testimony and why they're there, and you know, and people automatically assume like these people they're just no good and they belong there, and it's just whatever. We have no clue what their family background looked like, you know, or what their childhood looked like, you know, growing up in what kind of a home. And I actually had an opportunity to sit with one guy in particular that impacted my life massively. It was in 2009 in a town just a little ways from here in Washington State. And this guy was probably the most intimidating evil guy I've ever been around. Just the presence that he carried. He was evil. What he carried. And he was an Aryan Nation guy, in jail he was going back forever, pretty much. And at the time he was 38, and he'd been, since he was 18 years old, he told me he'd been out of prisons, and out of the system, for 21 months since he was 18 years old, combined. And he was 38, 21 months combined, that he hadn't been inside jail. So he'd been free for 21 months since he was 18, and he was going back for life. And I was like, dude, this guy's, you know, what in the world? You know, and he told me, because I gave my testimony that day, and somebody questioned, and I kind of got out there with it, with the spirit stuff, and just way out there, you know, and somebody said something like, bro, that was just the drugs, man. That ain't real. When this guy stepped in, right? And he says, let me tell you something. What this brother's saying is more real than he even knows. And he goes into great detail. And this guy, he carried weight in the system, if you will, where when he spoke, everybody else kind of shut up. He's a very intimidating guy. And he asked to talk to me in the end, when everybody else left the room. And he actually told me, you listen and you don't say anything. That's what he told me. And he begins to go into great detail about how his mom and dad made meth. You know, and as a child, when he was 3 years old, they started experimenting on him with meth when he was 3. they gave it to him. They made him eat it and different stuff. And so he never had a chance. You know, in my mind, I'm like, man, I can look at this guy and think like, what a, you know, in my mind, I was just like, dude, this guy, like, and we look at him and we think he's just nothing but garbage and all this stuff, but he never had a chance. You know, and this may be the only time that he ever gets to hear that, like, there is hope, that there is, you know, that there is, you know, there is a God that loves him, that he's not like this person, and that there is something great, far greater than, you know, this life, and it's that quick. And you know, all these different things went through my mind, and I'm thinking to myself, this guy never had a chance. I was worse than him. I knew. Wow. I knew the truth. I knew, like, I was raised in it. My family loved me. I had every opportunity, plus more than the average kid growing up, like in America, like where I was encouraged to you know, chase after my dreams of playing baseball, whatever it may have been, and always just never abused, nothing, just, you know, a great Christian family that loved me and stuff. And it was like this. I saw it as Paul described in Timothy when he talked about him being chief among sinners. And I always, you know, like paralleled myself to that. But even more so because I knew the truth. And it was like every day I made a conscious decision to get up, and basically this is what it was. I'd walk to the foot of the cross, spit in his face and give him the finger, and turn around and go about my day. And so I look at these murderers and rapists and these people who society would say are no good, they're garbage, you know, they deserve death and that's it. We have no clue. You know, and I'm not justifying any of that stuff, but I'm saying, like, there's people that don't have a chance unless we come in and shed light. Like, it's just this thing within me that's just like, we need to be people who love like Jesus loved. You know, and it doesn't, you know, not to look at circumstances or just even, you know, past, you know, history or records of people, and when the only way that we can do this is we can't put this on or make it up or whatever in true love, you know, and in walking in, we need to be people who know Jesus. And I'm so fortunate. I'm really long-winded about answering questions, but like, I look back, what saved my life was my mother.
Wow.
Her prayers. And so my thing is, like, whenever like, what works, what saves people? Prayers. God hears every one of them. Like, and my mom, you know, she can tell you better than I ever could, you know, as far as, but I remember the Lord, you know, showed me some things when I was in Charlotte, you know, as far as, like, because I just recently lost another friend to overdose and stuff, and I really, and he didn't know Jesus, you know, and I understood, I knew the gravity of where he was. You know, and I was like, why him? I mean, he didn't do a tenth of what I was doing, you know, and he didn't know, you know, and all these things would go, and I was really questioning the Lord, not in a bad way, but I just needed to know, like, why me? Why did you save me? Why not him? Like, what? I mean, I had more than ample chances and all these things, and the Lord spoke to me so clear, bro. And he said, you want to know why? And I said, yeah. And I saw my mom, and she was on our kitchen floor on her knees. Wow. And the Lord, and I saw her, and she was crying out. I mean, broken. And this was 19 years of this. You know, my mom has calluses on her knees from this. And the Lord said, as I see this picture, he says to me, because you had a praying mother. It had nothing to do with you, Brian. And so I always say, like, you know, my thing is, like, we need to be people who cry out to God for mercy, you know, in people's lives and for souls. And I need a fresh touch from this, you know, from the Lord. I need a burden for. I always tell people, like, a lot, not always, but often lately, I've told people, and I'm an intimacy guy. I love Jesus so much, bro, you know, and that's where everything starts and ends with me. But the church, as we don't need a revelation of heaven today. We need a revelation of hell and where people are going. And I'm telling you, want to light a fire. If we have a revelation of hell, there will be people will wake up, and we will understand, like, the things that we can't understand without having a revelation of it. It's one thing, I mean, whether we say it or not, we're fine with people dying and going to hell because of our actions in everyday life. We look at things and people and like, oh, they did that, they deserve that. And maybe subconsciously we're doing that. But anyways, yeah, I had a praying mother.